Abba. February 16, 2019. In the heart of each one, presence and absence merge in the same truth. Abba embraces what is present, and Abba gives the truth to each one. Beloved children of the One, in the eternal truth of the instant, may peace, joy, love and truth be our common space and time. In these days of celebration of life, relayed by the four living ones, where man and woman meet in the primordial androgynous, beyond all polarity, as well as beyond all manifestation, I greet you in the resonance of the Agape network, in this unspeakable embrace of the truth of life. In these precise days when life is celebrated in every possible way, in resistance as in surrender, in beauty and in truth, we install from heart to heart the truth of the one heart, the truth of the one. You're all invited in these days to refrain from anything, to limit nothing, to let what is and let disappear what has only appeared on the screen of consciousness, as on the screen of suffering, where there is nothing to do, where within immobility and emptiness, there is presence and absence, gathered in the same celebration of being and not being, where nothing can project, where nothing can be stopped, or even deviated. In dance as in rectitude, in movement as in immobility, the ineffable song of life unfolds in each of us, relayed to us by the song of the whales and translated in each of us by the resonance within the origin of creation, by the sacred word, the one who has no need of understanding, the one who is inscribed in the moment, not dependent on any form, any world or any specificity, where everything is spontaneous and where everything is evident, at all times, as well as at all instants. I invite each of you at this moment, when listening, to let the welcome be, in order to welcome without wanting anything, without asking anything, without projecting anything, without reticence and without questions, where you are crossed by eternity, where nothing of what is to appear can remain, where nothing of what passes can also remain. In the emptiness of the great silence, in the intensity of the instant, unfolds the eternity of the white paradise as ineffable joy, whose smile on your lips witnesses it and whose brightness of your eyes is its receptacle, where no question can appear, where no question can remain. My words have no other meaning on this day than to accompany the dance of creation, the dance of eternity, where nothing has ever moved and yet everything is movement, where everything merges, where everything opposite is resolved in the same burst of laughter, in the same consumption, whether by your tears, whether by reminiscence, whether by embracing, abandoning, or by welcoming, is realized, at the same time of this instant, in every heart willing to embrace, in every heart willing to take nothing, to appropriate nothing, in order to restore itself entirely to life as a gift, as a truth. Where there can be no search for meaning at all, because life is meaning in itself, making you discover your essence, as well as the essence of each person, where no direction can be taken, where no time can take place, where nothing can pass and yet everything passes, and yet everything is crossed. I invite you to dance and breathe with your heart, because each heart is in each heart, to perform the miracle with one heart. This is present at this moment, as soon as the embrace is made, through you, and not in you. The time has come to break away from the last certainties, the last experiences, as well as the last sufferings, because in the immediate instant that follows, joy can only invade you and literally possess you, because you have nothing, except life itself possesses you. Thus, in the depths of the flesh, in the depths of the cell, as well as in the densest of consciousness and the most ethereal of consciousness, the same recognition is experienced, beyond history, beyond any form, in the present instant, which merges all times and marries all spaces, putting an end to the idea, as to any experience of being dissociated or separated from anything or anyone else, where there is no master, no superiority or inferiority, because nothing can be measured there, because love is excessive, because embrace is unbelievable. Thus, every day that passes within the illusion of the time of this world, the revelation is completed in its entirety. At this moment, the apotheosis of life, which is not your life, unfolds its carpet, in order to welcome the totality of what you believed you appeared or were, in any situation whatsoever. You can only recognize yourself in this evidence that is present. You can only agree with your beauty. you can only agree with the truth of the moment, where you are only what is prior to any creation, and it is precisely through the reunion of the human feminine, as well as the human masculine, to the highest heaven, in the communion of the sacred feminine and the sacred masculine, where the inner child becomes the androgynous prerequisite for any substance, prior to any world. It is lived without difficulty, from the moment you forget yourself, in the course of this life as of any character you have played, in what the person calls past lives, and which shows you the futility and uselessness of any concept from now on, the uselessness and futility of taking some support or reference from past history, as in the hypothetical future, because there is no history, there is only that, where everything is resolved, where conflict is seen as a decoy. In the simplicity of our meeting, our communion, our listening, the embrace unfolds, embracing and accepting all that is presented, brother as sister, air as element, in any vision whatsoever, in any reference that is still present in you. Each of you is invited, with solicitude, to dwell in this space without time, and in this time without space, where all this is only appearing, where all this is only play. Silence. My friend, my beloved, remember, not of history, but of the eternal presence and absence that you are, through this body, as through everything that crosses your gaze, your ultimate questions, your ultimate sufferings, through our common embrace, simply by that, without asking for anything and expecting anything, without seeing or feeling anything, then freedom appears before the observer, who becomes the witness, not of himself, but of oneness. The Word has come to light, the Word is no longer the flesh even if it had become flesh, the Word is free, from any attachment as from any creation. What you have expressed in recent days, what you have lived, only reflects the installation of the ineffable, of which no conscience can account, except through the manifestation of spontaneity, in whatever form it manifests itself, where nothing can be missing, where nothing can be hidden or even forgotten. This is the embrace that naturally impels the gift in each heart. Indeed, the love that is given cannot be removed, whatever the reticence and resistance. Because, today, the very idea of any separation, like the very idea of being a person, can only collapse, through tears or laughter, to give way to the nakedness of love, which needs neither object, nor a subject, nor a transmitter or a receiver, and even less form or time. It is lived and received, as it is given, from the heart, magnified by the radiance of what has been called the ninth body. Then, the sacred heart raises its radiance and diffuses it in a constant way, in every part of this body, in every part of your consciousness. Silence. You're invited, by the whole of the one heart, to deposit what may remain of burdens, weight, pain, so that the sweetness and evidence fill each weight and lighten it, fill each deficiency that it seems to you to perceive, by the fullness of the instant. The time has come, within the whole of creation, of the past and the future, to be reabsorbed by the density of love, by its intensity, by its revelation in you, where there is nothing to judge, where there is nothing to condemn, where there is no longer any causality, but simply the evidence of love, where you will never thirst again, where you exceed all need to understand, to grasp elements of your history as well as this world, as well as all people. What is there does not need you, what is there does not need anyone, and yet it is lived in this flesh, as in any state of consciousness, where it is no longer even possible to differentiate between the different fragments of consciousness as presented by countless speakers and by countless people who have lived, in all centuries of the earth. Silence. In the progression of the great silence that brings you to the ultimate, you know to live it, you cannot reject anything, you can only let what still needs to be enlightened, in order to give you the feeling of an incredible progression, but at the same time leading you to understand through living it, that it has always been there and that only the look, the point of view, pretended to ignore the truth of love. Love is the spontaneous manifestation of the evidence of the light and its intelligence, which does not need you, except to be the vessel that welcomes, that gathers, that makes you the receptacle of the unspeakable beauty, breathing and then naturally emanating from this opaque and ephemeral body, where everything is transparent, where everything is clear, where you conceive and understand it, that even liberation in the very sense that you have experienced it until now does not need to be recorded or realized, because it has always been there, in any form or world whatsoever. Silence. From that moment, who is there at that moment, it appears, showing you that it was already there, invisible to your eyes, invisible by the opacity of that body, and yet today is realized, and yet today is seen and recognized, this irrevocably ending the very idea of questioning anything, because in the question is the answer, making you laugh at yourself, making you laugh at the circumstances. There is your only being, there is no need for shenanigans, there is no need for delay, there is no need for a frame of reference, because everything is done without you, but through you. Silence. Abba, in the heart of each one, embraces in each one, in turn embraces, in an endless round, the heart of each one, which is none other than my heart, where even the differences, whatever the experience, no longer make any difference, and no longer put any distance. Where the way, truth and life show you that you have never moved, that all this was only a dream, and that even through the initial trauma at the separation of the masculine and the feminine, no longer makes sense or hinders. The word is then liberated, beyond any model or creation, because everything has already been created and everything has been lived. It cannot be otherwise, in the very architecture of time. Whatever your obligations, whatever the obstacles, they are swept away by the unspeakable truth. Everyone is invited with insistence and permanence by the injunction of the light, an injunction that comes from the heart of yourselves, as soon as, within you, the cry is made, the cry of illusion, the cry of the idea of waiting for some evolution or some more favorable moment. This is how this world still works, in its interrogation, while the true and ineffable beauty does not care about everything that happened yesterday, like the day before yesterday, like everything that will happen tomorrow, like the day after tomorrow, where rest, words like searching for meaning, can only be the solution, to what may still seem embarrassing to you, to what may still seem to you to be absent, to what may not seem to be lived and yet has already been lived, and is always lived in every minute. Simply, you have not yet seen it, because you anticipate the need to understand, the need to explain, the need to be reassured, the need to compare yourself or the need to discuss, and this will be demonstrated as it is for many brothers and sisters in the very game of life, under any circumstances. Then, from that moment on, the smile will blossom again on your lips. Good and evil, inherent in this world, can no longer stand in the way of the truth. It is in these moments of the present instant, in this very instant of life, as when you will listen and embrace, far beyond my simple words, your own presence, which is nothing other than mine, as well as your absence, which is nothing other than our common gift. This celebration, because it is one, cannot be subject to any conditions or limits. Don't worry about how you feel, don't worry about your approvals or disapprovals. Don't worry about whether it's true or false, because it ultimately depends only on where you think you are standing. At that moment, your heart implodes and explodes. The breathing of the heart then becomes an explosion of joy, an explosion of love, which is directed elsewhere only within you, in spite of this explosion, because what can still resemble an exterior is what puts an end to the illusion of distance, to the illusion of time that passes by, to the illusion of being an individual. You do not have to worry or question yourself about any circumstance of your life, because it is precisely these circumstances particular to each life that led you to this. Embracing and giving are part of the same dance. Embracing does not only go inside, the gift does not come out only outside, it is an inner state. There is no outside, no inside. It is at this exact instant that you are totally free of any frame of reference, any history, and this is shown to you by the initial moment of the dream of creation, which in fact cannot be dated, but which can be, there too, only lived and not understood. It is now, it is forever, it is for every moment, it is for eternity, beyond this world, beyond your form, as beyond any form. Silence. You, anchors and sowers of light, in the time of the history of the years that followed the celestial wedding, you discover and live that you are the pure eternal light, independent of any history, of any form, as well as of any still apparent and residual distinction between being and non-being, and your person. The majesty of love, the majesty of truth, can only dance, the dance of joy, the dance beyond people, where the reconciliation of the sacred and the simulacrum, in these different polarities, is inscribed in the joy of the moment and in the eternal smile that does not need lips to manifest it, nor consciousness to express it. It is madness in the one who believes himself to be a person, it is absurdity for the one who believes himself to be spiritual, but it is unshakable truth for the one who settles in simplicity and humility, where everything that touches, suffering as happiness, is simply the game that unfolds against your will, and yet, thanks to you, where you discover that in fact everything has always been accomplished, and that no effort is necessary, because evidence nourishes you and effort restricts you, where there is no longer any possible choice, because choice itself is a carrier of doubt, is a carrier of indecision. Love is not decided, truth is not decreed, love and truth cannot be said, even if they are transcribed, as much by the song of whales as by the word of genetistic mothers, as by silence. In this, you know that there is nothing to undertake, nor anything to modify, because perfection is of itself, without you, and through you, where any idea of any evolution can only appear as ridiculous and useless. In that silence, nothing can be missing, because everything is empty and everything becomes the container that never fills, and yet is always full of that void. This vessel is the vessel of your heart, the one that embraces flowers and essence, the one that embraces life and restores it in its entirety, for nothing can belong to you, being already there. It can only be a restitution, it can only result from an abandonment, not only to the light, but a total abandonment of yourselves, where there can be no claim, where there can be no doubt. As long as you doubt, then you have not accepted in full. The cetacean song that has been accompanying you for a few weeks now, leading you to this celebration of the four living beings, to the fusion of the Thes, realized up to the atomic level of each atom in the universe, and not only in this world, and not only in this dimension, since it includes all creations as well as each world. In this is your consolation, in this is your regeneration, in this you recognize yourself. Everything has always been perfect, from the moment when consciousness no longer lets the ball of the game of life, but from the moment when you remain in silence, in the heart of the heart, observing your life as any life, not through visions and perceptions, but as a dance of evidence, where there is nothing to do, where you have nothing to do, or even to be, where no more landmarks can be of any use to you, because you are yourself the landmark, because you are yourselves the ineffable of ecstasy as well as antithesis, and that nothing can move, that nothing can seem or appear incomplete. Silence. In what is being experienced at this moment, shows you the power of great silence, my words only accompanying this great silence, giving it rhythm in its breath, in its deployment and in its evidence, where there is no longer any difference, not only between you and any other, but between man and woman, between the sacred male and female, where the ultimate complementarity as antagonism, resolves itself of itself, without you and through you, making you live and discover that there is an equal part in the right one, as much feminine as masculine, without any imbalance, despite the physical appearance, it, always real, thus balancing in a natural way, letting be what is, and letting appear what can never be. Thus disappears all appearance, thus the resonance is made, no longer from person to person and no longer from one person to another, whether through the agape resonance network, but directly through the sense of embrace, because from the moment the balance of the masculine and the feminine is experienced in you, ending all memory as well as all initial suffering, then the beauty is perfect. No imperfection can remain, and you know it, because you live it, even if there is still in this body, as in your relationships, a need for consolation, a need to share, a need to touch you, whether by hands, or by hearts, whatever the distance, whatever the space and whatever the time. This cannot be understood, it can only be lived, because from living it comes understanding, which does not depend on any judgment, any specificity, or any contradiction. Your freedom, your resonance and your fraternity, which knows no country, which knows no language, like no difference in form, because you're all form, even within the formless. The waters of heaven fertilize the waters of earth, the waters of earth fertilize the waters of heaven. This is called seeding, and it is connected to you by the song of cetaceans, translated beyond words, by the spontaneous song of geneticist mothers, merged with the resonance of the song of whales at the top, spreading through the ether, in your heart of the heart, and then emanating what many sisters have already perceived, or even manifested, often with pain until now, which today no longer carries this pain, memory or reminiscence, but is definitely part of the beauty of the instant. So yes, freedom is there. Whatever the constraints of your obligations as a society, you are no longer subject to that. Whatever remains as convenience, whatever remains as obligation, these can no longer hold today, in the face of the truth and the freedom that is there. This is how you contribute, through non-violence, through non-action, through being and non-being, to letting this world live what it lives, because you are not of this world, but you're this world in its entirety, like everyone else, where there is no longer any distinction, despite the difference in forms, despite the difference in dimensions, despite the polarities between men and women. The man is as much a woman as the woman is as much a man as the man, to perform the miracle of one thing only. It is inscribed in every couple, it is inscribed between every man and every woman. There is no need for a role, there is no need for attribution, but simply to recognize it, because through acceptance, embraced and gift, it is lived and it is beauty. You can only live it, even if today, at the moment, it does not appear to you. This means that there are still a few appearances that are not enlightened, a few appearances that are dissolved by the beauty of the moment, where life is lived, and where your life is also lived, without needing to choose, without needing to decide, without needing to clarify anything or anyone else, because through the impulse of spontaneity, embrace and gift, you cross the last apparent inconsistencies, you cross the last suffering, the last tears. Freedom is there, it is not elsewhere, it is not tomorrow, it does not depend on any event that has already taken place, since it is nothing more than the realization that the Alpha and Omega have never been separated, nor even divided, that there is neither man, nor woman, now that you have recognized the suffering and violence, the wound and the rape of the sacred feminine, as the sacred masculine. So at that moment, and at that moment, you can be the man, you can be the woman, in any interaction whatsoever, it's no longer a problem. Everyone is embraced with the same intensity, without any distinction of any event, any feeling, or any appearance. It is there where every child is your child, every husband is your husband, every woman is your wife, not in the sense of belonging, not in the sense of property, but on the contrary, in the sense of restitution to freedom. The evidence then manifests itself in everyone in the slightest detail, for everything becomes significant and means something to you, in every event of each of your days, even within the most total simulacrum, where laughter prevails over all suffering, where laughter prevails over any element that seems to resist or oppose in one way or another. Thus is discovered the freedom that depends neither the inside nor the outside, because in welcoming and giving, there is no more inside or outside, because there is no more limit, because there is no more border, because there is no more distinction, whatever the appearances may be. The observer thus moves away from observation, from the simulacrum as well as the sacred, in order to be available, where there is nothing to observe, where there is nothing to look at, but just to reveal the marriage of being and non-being, the marriage of the masculine and the feminine in his humanity as in his sacred, where there can be no position of dominance, ancestry, or constraint. Everyone gives himself freedom, everyone gives himself peace, so that everyone may live peace, so that everyone may be free, because nothing can be excluded from it and nothing can be taken away or divided. This is the event, this is the white paradise, this is the absolute. While the song of the whales resounds, in all the waters of the earth as in the waters of heaven, the waters below meet the waters above, so that the Word who became flesh may allow the flesh to become the Word. It is this alchemy that is unfolding, that you perceive beyond all feelings and situations, where life has no use for your life, making you available to your humanity, to your availability, where nothing that is polarized can disturb you or interrupt you. Silence. Abba speaks to you beyond the words that are spoken, because even my words pass through you, beyond their meaning, beyond their significance, they are the sign and they are the explanation. It has nothing to do with yang or yin, it has nothing to do with any aspect of discrimination, because as long as you discriminate against it, you are not quite true, and yet you discover it. There is no man or woman, there is just life. There is no form that holds, nor any world that holds, when life is restored to itself. This is what is lived at this moment, as in every instant. The celebration is lived every minute, it is communion and fusion, it transmutes and transubstantiates the cells, the body, everything that is known and perceptible to you is no longer of any use to you in the face of this immensity, which is summed up in the smallest point, because you are from everywhere, and this has always been the case. No pain still present can interfere with the truth anymore. The truth ends the pain, the truth ends the suffering, and there is nothing you can do about it. Thus is the majesty of love, so is the majesty of resonance, so is the Christic matrix, and so led you to at the least of your thoughts, even if they are the opposite of the truth. You cannot resist, you cannot oppose yourself, except at the risk of consuming yourself, a consumption that will reveal the one, that will reveal the non-being present in all circumstances, as in every pain and suffering evacuated, yet come in from so far away. Then, you will laugh at yourself, whatever you still think of it today, then you will discover that love is the only justification and that, indeed, everything has always been in its very right place, even suffering, to bring you to the point where you no longer need anything or anyone, where everything is resonance, where everything resonates from close to close, as well as from far to far, because this agape resonance knows no distance, no time, no separation, where no one can be glorified, where no one can be ahead or superior to anyone or to anything. So, my friends, my loved ones, Abba is there only for you and your Abba, no matter what you think. There is neither man nor woman, in the same way that there is no world, in the same way that everything has always been perfect, because nothing has ever moved, and everything that has appeared must disappear in the same fire of joy, in the same carelessness, and in the same silence. Abba asks you nothing, Abba gives himself to you, but it is not a movement, it is simply the evidence that you had forgotten, recovering the memory of the initial instance by the song of cetaceans, by the word of geneticist mothers, prior to the very creation, where everything is only silence, which has been transformed into word. In the beginning was the word, a beginning that never happened. In the end is the word, for there will never be an end to what has never begun and has always been there. Silence. Everything must be accompanied with the same happiness and, I would say, the same elegance. Under any circumstances, at any time, you can no longer ignore the slightest request from the brother or sister who seems to be suffering, from the child who is starving, from the one who needs a helping hand, because that one is you, at another time, at another time, at another apparent definition. At that time, the donation is spontaneous and the embracement is automatic. You no longer even have to ask yourself, you no longer even need an intention, you no longer need an agreement from anyone, because you're each and everyone is you, and each of you as each of us, wherever we are, only reflects the same truth, only reflects the same love, even if the presentation appears to you as the opposite, because everything leads to the same ineffable, to the same point, in the same space and the same time, which is the sacred space of your heart, which knows neither man nor woman, and yet recognizes each suffering as its own, and which allows precisely not to let the slightest suffering appear in anyone. This is happening now, and even in the intensity, of course, that you are still experiencing certain situations, certain discomforts and sufferings, that they affect the body, that they affect everything else, that they do not make any difference there either, and no longer put any distance. Thus is the evidence, it puts an end to all discussion, to all positioning, it transcends suffering as well as distance in the same beatitude, and in the same goodness. You cannot do otherwise than be benevolent towards everything, towards every situation, towards every brother, as towards every opposition, because benevolence is, there too, now, a devouring fire that absorbs and consumes every illusion and appears every bit as every suffering. This is done without you, and yet through you, you can do nothing about it except to see, to be lightened, and to come out of it true, full of power, full of strength, full of a certainty that does not depend on a frame of reference, or even on a form. Silence. At this moment, Abba embraces you as you embrace Abba. It is the same movement, because there is no movement, because there is no distance, because there is no time, and it is visible, and it is lived, and it is. There is your power, there is your strength, when you rely solely, beyond all appearances, on the true love that you have always been, despite all the sufferings, despite all the manifestations. At that moment, beyond saying I and my Father are one, love even takes this definition and leaves you stunned and blissful, obviously, whatever the state of the body, whatever the state of your consciousness, because any positioning of the body and consciousness, in suffering or in liveness, leads in the same way, with the same intensity, to letting the truth be established, which has never disappeared, and which has never missed you, whatever the imprisonment, whatever the stories, even the initial ones. You're all of these at the same time, and yet you are none of these. There is no paradox here, there is no antinomic aspect or even complementarity there, because it is part of the only truth. No one can escape it, no one can add anything to it, you can do nothing about it. This is the true power, this is the true force. Silence. There is just to embrace, and to embrace, you must give yourself back. And to embrace without break or limit, you live it and you will live it, you can only give yourself. Everything else is superfluous, everything else is useless, and everything else will only become an increasingly visible obstacle between what you think you are and the truth that you are in non-being. Silence. You're the living heart, you're the Alpha and the Omega, and you live that there is no difference between the Alpha and the Omega. The Alpha is indistinctly the beginning and the end, the Omega is indistinctly the beginning or the end of what has never begun, and which has never begun, and which will never end. Silence. Silence is embrace, resonance is embrace, and all this is a gift, because life is a gift, and because everything is a gift, because everything is free, and nothing can be paid for, and there is no price to pay, except in your own resistance, in your own reluctance, as in your own distances. Ever bowed within you because that is how everything is given, because that is how everything is true, because that is how you live the uselessness of any judgment, towards yourself or towards any situation like anyone else, because that is how it is, because it has always been so and always will be so. The angel of the presence is only yourself at another time, in another place and in another creation. You're as much the whale as the genetistic mother, as the urchin. You're beyond any definition, beyond any role, beyond any history or suffering. This is experienced, whatever the access roads that have led you to this point, whatever the state of your body, whatever the states of this ephemeral, in whatever field. In this, you are true. In that, you are whole. In this, there can no longer be the slightest fragmentation, whatever the explosion you're experiencing, of tears or joy, because all this is only the same light and the only truth. Then Abba blesses each of you, as I embrace all your blessings, which is only a resonance of love. Agape. 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 Faham. 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 Silence. I will conclude with these words. Nizargadeo told you that his words cannot fail, Abba tells you that you cannot fail, even without words, and whatever your words are, it doesn't make any difference, because life can never fail. Despite appearances, you were never born, you never died, except within the person, except at the level of stories, because there is nothing to pay. I greet your eternity, I greet your being, I greet your non-being, but I also greet every cell of this body, like every member of this planet, like every kingdom of this planet. Abba gives you grace. He can only give you what is already there and what is your right, from the moment you give, from the moment you embrace. Through Jean-Luc Young. Les Transformations. Transcription. Agape Team English Translation. https://lmf